Last time we covered FNAF 4's animatronic models. This time we're going to cover FNAF 5 animatronics models. And real quick, let's just refresh you on a face, vertex, and edge. A vertices is the point at which triangles will meet, or these guys right here. An edge is the lines that make up a triangle, so one triangle would have 3 individual edges. And a face, otherwise known as a tri, is just simply what you can imagine it is, the actual face of the triangle. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's get into the video. Instead of pulling from FNAF VR's models this time, I wanted to get some accurate fan models going because I just didn't think the VR models were up to the standard of today's video. And to start us off, let's go with Baby. This model contains 56,537 faces, 1,124,424 edges. Now this model is very clean and kind of reminds me of the toy animatronics with its nice, clean, shiny finish to it. As we can see here, the fingers and the hands are a lot more sausage-like than any of the previous animatronic models we've taken a look at. And something interesting about this model is the tips of the fingers are very strange. They don't resemble fingernails, and they don't resemble any previous animatronics hands. They kind of just have an opening at the front where you can see more metallic looking parts. It's an interesting design choice, and I don't know how well it would play if this was an actual animatronic, but it is what it is. As you can see, Baby has this little fan on her chest. I don't know if it's for venting or just for vanity, but it is a cool little detail that Scott decided to add. And if we take a look at the skirt here, you can see there's quite a lot of overlap in the model layers. This could be just a fan model thing, but I do see the similarities in Scott's actual model and this model, so I do think Scott would have done a similar kind of technique in overlapping a bunch of different models. And as you can see all over Baby's body, there's these little squared kind of textures. Not exactly square, but giving off a sporadic patterned look. If we take a look at the upskirt here, you can see that there's a lot of endo. You can see through the actual animatronic. And that squarish texture we were talking about earlier is a lot larger than anywhere else on the model. Baby's kneecaps have these little black buttons on them, and this must only be a design feature because I can't see any reason why there would be these little bumpers here. But it does fill that empty space that otherwise would have been there if these weren't in place. Baby has her jester-like shoes, which have the little bell at the tip. I think these are a cute little addition, but don't really make too much sense as Baby's character isn't portrayed as a court jester by any means. And FNAF 5 doesn't take place at a carnival, so it's a little strange to see him. We also get a look at the mic model here, remaining very simplistic, with the most polys being used on the end of the microphone and on the little nubs that surround the head of it. Now, this model also has the ability to remove the skin, so I wanted to take a look at Baby's endoskeleton real quick while we can. As you can see, it's very spiral-like and looks more like a cluster of wires and animatronic parts than anything else. It definitely does not resemble any previous endo we've seen in any of the FNAF games up to this point, but it is definitely very interesting to peel back the Baby and see what lies beneath. And with Baby comes her little bitty babs, which in my opinion are the actual scariest animatronic in this game. This model has 11,924 faces and 17,976 edges. They use a similar skin color for these bitty babs instead of an actual white animatronic color, which is very off-putting, especially with the differentiation in the white paneling that this animatronic also has. So not only does it resemble a real-life Baby, but also an animatronic at the same time, giving that uncanny valley vibe to it. His hands and his feet are very chunky and poly-like, and are honestly a little undercut. I do think they could have done a little bit more work on this, but it is what it is. There's a lot of poly work on Bitty Bab's ears as well, as you can see, and obviously they have to make that so the ear can curve properly. But I mean, if you're gonna put this much detail into the ear, might as well do the same with the hands. But I guess it is what it is. Bitty Bab has also got this super chunky nose, chunky teeth, and a weirdly separated chin. Unlike the other animatronics in this game, this animatronic's face does not open in 4 different plates, so it's very weird to see that only the chin is separate. Bitty Bab does have one of the most beautiful eye colors I've ever seen in any FNAF game though. A vibrant galaxy purple, and I do think it makes up for a lot of the terrible things that have been done to this animatronic. Up next we have Funtime Freddy. This model has 2,698,916 faces and 5,416,196 edges. A very high polygonal count on this one, I must say. Now, Freddy, like some of the other animatronics in this game, has a speaker right on his chest, and I don't think we were ever canonically made aware of what this speaker was supposed to do. I understand these animatronics were supposed to be for capturing children, but honestly, I can't see the benefit of a speaker. Maybe it's to lure kids in with music or familiar sounds of their parents, and maybe it was covered in FNAF 6 and I just missed it. Who knows? Freddy's hands are very similar to Baby's, very sausage-like, and he also does have a microphone in his hand as well, although it is very different from Baby, as the wire to the microphone is fully exposed, unlike Baby's, which is cut off halfway. On top of that, Freddy's hands don't have the exposed nubs at the tip, which is a lot better in my opinion. However, Freddy only does have one hand, and the other hand is taken up by Bonbon. I don't know what went wrong with this model when I imported it, but this Bonbon has glowing pink eyes, which usually means that a texture is missing, which is alright because I'm sure that you guys can fill in the blanks at home. And just like Baby's, this model also has that weird rectangular squared off pattern to it, unlike Funtime Freddy, who is perfectly pristine and clear. And Bonbon only has 3 fingers on each hand, which is very unlike the rest of the animatronics in this game. Most of the animatronics do have 5 fingers, or no fingers at all. And the inside set of Bonnie's endo teeth are pretty sharpened off. Freddy's head is very clean and pristine, something we usually don't see out of Freddy models in the game, as Freddy usually appears pretty scuffed up, aside from Toy Freddy. And Freddy does have 4 toes in this game, which is very different from FNAF 1, 2, and 3's Freddy. And his body does have that similar paneling that Baby's had, where it color shifts halfway through. Now let's take a look at Freddy's endoskeleton without going too deep. You can see the plates in Freddy's face that I'm sure would hold up the actual shell of the animatronic, and theoretically would assist in helping him move those plates. And as you can see, when we remove the rest of Freddy's shell, the speaker on his chest is actually just a reflected sphere. I don't know if this was just a fan model thing, or if this is actually represented in the standard animatronic, but it is interesting to see what it looks like without all the extra shelling. Just like Baby, Freddy also has very spiral-like hodgepodges of wires and masks that we just really don't see out of any other endo. We could take a look at Bonbon's endoskeleton, which is a lot simpler than Freddy's as well, only containing a few different pieces of metal that wrap in circles around to hold his casings, but it does look a lot creepier than Freddy's endo, I gotta admit. Real quick too, this model pack also came with the 4th closet version of Freddy that you see on the cover. This doesn't really appear in the game, but I thought it'd be interesting to take a brief look at, the only difference being in the actual colors, where he's 100% muted to grays and whites, except for his eyes, which are beaming red. Just something interesting I thought I'd show off since I had access to it. And we also have the full Yendo model here, which actually does appear separate from Freddy in the game, so I figured let's give this one a full chance as well. I gotta assume it's almost identical to what would be fully underneath Freddy if we fully degloved him, but I just wanted to give him his separate time to shine since he's a separate animatronic entirely. This model contains 189,416 faces and 380,310 edges. As you can see, there's a little point on top of his head where a hat might be installed, which is pretty funny. And Yendo also does have his own set of eyebrows, which would be totally hidden underneath the endoskeleton. Maybe theoretically these would be used to help Freddy move his actual eyebrows, but who's to say? But unlike Freddy, his hands are very shovel-like and flat. I find it hard to believe that these endo hands would fit into Freddy's actual model, but I guess there's a way to cram it in. He's also got this black disc around his chest, which might be illusion tech, or it might not be. Who knows? I know as Scott went on with the series, he decided to go with illusion discs as a main form of kind of tricking people into his series into believing what he wants, but who's to say if this is actual proof of it before he came up with the idea? As we take a look at Yendo's feet too, he has very wiry, circular feet with 4 little tips at the end that would probably control Freddy's toes. Up next we have Ballora. This model contains 334,617 faces and 670,854 edges. Again, like the other Funtimes, this model remains very clean and pristine, showing absolutely no signs of wear or tear on it, which in my books makes a great animatronic model. As you can see, Ballora has those ballerina's feet pointed at the tip, allowing for a perfect rotation. I'm no ballerina, so I don't know the actual terminology, but it is interesting to see that Ballora has these permanently installed ballerina's feet. Ballora, like the other Funtimes, has her 4 faceplate animatronics, but if you take a closer look at her mouth, she has extremely sharp teeth. I'd even venture to say a little bit sharper than any of the Nightmare animatronics' teeth. I don't know how well that would play at a children's party, and if it might strike some fear into them, but at the end of the day, these animatronics weren't really made to entertain, were they? Her hands are the first example of fingernails we've ever seen in the FNAF series, and won't be the last. And unlike Baby and Freddy, her fingers are very delicate and thin. As you can see here too in her neck, she has a big opening around it, which is a little unsettling. She also has a little headband that kind of phases into the animatronic. I feel like they should have maybe got rid of some of the polys on it to make it a little bit more seamless, but it is what it is. What's interesting too is the bun on the back of her hair also has 4 segments, meaning this could also probably open up to a different model inside. It's not something we generally see in the game, but it is there, so maybe that's evidence to something. And with Ballora comes her little mini Renas, who sit at 11,118 faces and 18,074 edges. The simplest model we'll look at today, and it shows as we take a look at the wireframe here. Unlike any other animatronic, her face has absolutely no differentiating facial plates, and just exists as a full model. Their eyes are very lifeless and have absolutely no texture to it whatsoever. It's just a hole of blackness. And her feet, unlike Ballora's, actually look like they'd have the ability to switch in and out of tiptoe position, although I can't see how many times they would actually go to full flat feet. This skirt is also a little bit cleaner than Baby's, showing no signs of overlapping, but it does remain very simple and polygonal as well. As we take a look inside too, it does phase into the inside of the model, but that's something again you'd never see in the game. Moving on to Funtime Foxy, who has 205,283 faces and 408,032 edges. Now this model is very shiny and pristine, and I love it so much. This is probably one of my favorite models, as all Foxy models usually are. And what's interesting about this model is it gave us the first glimpse at what Mangle might have looked like before all the mangling. Funtime Foxy also does have fingernails and very delicate fingers, leading to the possible conclusion that it might be a girl, but I'm not to say, and I'm not going to throw any theories out there. And just like Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy also has that same speaker on her chest, probably with the same exact method of making it. His or her legs are also very simplistic, and probably the most simplistic out of any of the models, showing not much deviation in textures or colors on the legs, unlike the others who have very differing colors on their plates. And similarly to Freddy, also contains only 4 toes. But what's interesting about these toes is they're not actually connected to Funtime Foxy, they're just sort of hovering there. As you can see, there's quite a big gap in between, and there's nothing connecting them at all. Very strange. And just like Foxy should, their teeth are very sharp and fox-like. What's cool about this animatronic is there seems to be 8 different plates. 2 on the top of the head, 2 by the cheeks, and then 4 on the snout. As you can see, all the little different breaks in the plating, which is very different from the rest of the animatronics, which usually only have 4 plates. Another interesting fact is this is the only Foxy model up to this point in the game series that doesn't have a hook on Foxy's hand. There's also quite a lot of poly detail on these circular little freckles on her cheeks. Maybe these are whisker spots, maybe these are little freckles. Who's to say what Scott's intentions were? And the tail is very shiny and pointed at the tip with a very beautiful color scheme in my opinion. And if we take a look at Foxy's endo, just like the rest, it's very spiral-like, but has a very different head shape as Foxy would. And this endoskeleton is actually reused one more time, but not in a standalone animatronic model, no, instead in our next model, Lolbit. Now, I said the Foxy model was my favorite, but I gotta redact that. Looking at this bad boy, I now realize what the best model in this game is. The color scheme, the textures, and the overall creepiness in the eyes is really what does it for me. This model contains 166,389 faces and 333,443 edges. Now, avid poly counters might notice there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the poly counts between these models. There's a few less in Lolbits, and why is that? Well, that's because if you can see, there's a little less endo work done in the actual skull of Lolbit. Unlike Foxy's model, this model has fully black eyes with untextured white pupils, which is pretty eerie, I gotta admit. However, the orange, purple, and white color schemes are absolutely perfect. They all complement each other perfectly, and I think it really does a great job. Just like Foxy, Lolbit also has fingernails at her tips painted purple. But unlike Foxy, the tip of her tail is fully white, unlike the pink on Foxy's tail. The speaker on Lolbit's chest also doesn't have the speaker texture and remains totally black. So who's to say if this is actually a speaker at all, or if this is just another illusion disc technology sort of deal. Other than that, this model does retain a lot of similar characteristics to Foxy and is most likely just a rip and retexture of it. So with that, I think we can move on to the final animatronic, the one that you've probably been waiting for. And that is Ennard. Surprisingly, with all the detail in this model, it's actually not the heaviest model in the game poly-wise, only composed of about 111,767 faces and 208,224 edges. Unlike the rest of the models in this game, this model is not pristine at all, containing a lot of loose, jagged wires, sharp edges, and overall dangerous look to it. There's a ton of poly work done on the pom-pom of his hat, which is interesting to see, and it makes sense as it's supposed to be a circle with a little bit of deviation in it, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point it out. Ennard's fingers are very different than any other animatronic, having only 4 fingers, each of them having wires extrude out of the ends of them, and definitely not in a flattering way, being very all over the place and kinda gross. Ennard has a bunch of eyes made up from the previous animatronics as well, 1 purple, 1 orange, and 2 blue, with one of them falling out of his skull. Ennard also has some pretty sharp long teeth, not the sharpest, but still pretty sharp. He also has a big bright red clown nose that actually joins 2 of his faceplates together, leading to him probably not being able to open them properly. Not that he needs to, since he's about to slip into Michael laughed him. He also has this big red button on his chest. I don't know why, because I mean, at this point, you're already down in the dumps. Why try to save yourself with any redeeming qualities? But it is a funny little model that just sits there at his chest that's very different from the rest of them, aside from his party hat. Ennard's feet are also very wiry, with the tips extruding even more wires. It almost looks like he has 6 toes on each feet, but I don't know if those extra 2 on each end should be counted as toes. Overall, this model is the creepiest in the game, aside from Bidybab in my opinion, and really showcases the horror aspect of FNAF 5. Other than that, that's all the models we have to look at today in FNAF 5. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, we have a ton of videos that you might like that are very similar to this one. Next week, we're going to be covering FNAF 6 budget models. There are so many models in FNAF 6 that I'm going to have to split it up into about 3 videos just to cover them all properly. But other than that, that's all we got for you today, so I'll see you in the next video. Peace!